Well, good morning, Bill.
Good morning.
How are you?
Very good, Doug.
Very pleased to be with you this morning. Why don't we begin, Bill, by you telling us a bit about your background before you took the helm of the Pasco EDC, and then tell us about the EDC's mission and its services. But let's start with your background.
Sure. Well, thank you, Doug, and thanks again for the opportunity to speak today. And I'll share with you, like a lot of economic developers, I didn't get into the field on purpose. I think a lot of us fall into these roles after being involved in other private sector or public sector opportunities. And I came to economic development from international shipping. So I've been involved in shipping and steamship business for about 10 years and was traveling quite a bit. Decided I wanted to do something more local, called the local Chamber of Commerce and asked them if they had a list of international jobs. And they said, well, no, we don't, but we know of this really cool opportunity coming available with a controversial organization called Enterprise Florida. And at the time, there was a lot of people from the Florida Department of Commerce that were not so enthusiastic about the change, and several were leaving, and it left opportunity for me to get involved. And I started on the international side of economic development. Did that for about 10 years with the state, and because it was a controversial organization that had no model, we made lots of mistakes, and because of that, I learned a lot. And when you learn a lot, you become valuable. And went from Florida to South Carolina, was the director of commerce there for 4 years under Mark Stanford under his second term. And then headed to Atlanta, where I worked with Mayor Kasim Reed to help establish his economic development business, especially in recruitment, which a lot of the projects were locating around the city of Atlanta, and he really wanted in the city. And then to Charlotte, North Carolina, which was a competitor to both South Carolina and Atlanta, where I learned a lot about redevelopment, urbanization, those types of things. But especially in this time of inclusion and diversity, a lot of that was bubbling up at the time, and most of us as economic developers had to get involved with that. And we had every intention to stay in Charlotte and retire there, and was approached by a recruiter to talk about Pasco County. And I knew Pasco from my previous life in Florida, and did not realize at the time, though, that they had a 1-cent sales tax that 20% went to economic development. And that was pretty forward thinking for a community. And very much got my attention to say, hey, here's a community that gets it. So much that they voted with their wallets to make sure that economic development is funded. And it was good to come back to Florida. Both of my children were on the Florida prepaid college plan. So this is definitely where we've got our long-term roots, and it's a great area to be.
My gosh, you bring rich experience to the EDC. Tell us about its mission and services in a nutshell.
Sure. So we've been around for 31 years. We were formerly the Committee of 100, and like a lot of groups have transitioned into a 501c3, kind of a public-private feel, like Enterprise Florida, like at the state level. Our main goal is really to diversify the local economy, and then also to make sure that we remain competitive, that we don't do this in a vacuum. We recognize that our surrounding counties, our surrounding states, and for that matter, nations all over the world are competing for business as well as our businesses. So we've put a lot of focus on competitiveness, which allows us to do things a little bit more than the traditional offering of recruitment and retention and marketing. We also work in entrepreneurial programs. We have incubators. We work with talent pipeline and workforce development. We work with real estate and even microloans too. So it's a situation where when we see gaps in the system, if no one else is filling it, from a leadership perspective, the EDC will jump in and make sure it's done because it impacts our businesses and impacts our community.
Well, thank you for that background, Bill. Our agenda today, our topic, is board member engagement. But before we really dig into that, tell us a bit about your EDC board, your board of directors, in terms of its composition and how you've structured the board.
Yeah, it's pretty big. We've got currently 37 members, and since I've been here, we've had to adjust our bylaws at least once to allow for a larger board because we've been successful with them. I think a lot of small organizations struggle with a board of that size, but we've had really good luck with them. A piece of that board at the highest level of investment or donation to our organization makes up our policy council. Policy council has 10 members, and they help to draft policy. So they work on our legislative agenda. They get FaceTime and access to our elected officials at the state level, at the federal level. And they also work on things like strategic planning with us, and they get 2 seats on the board. So it's a great way to make sure that those that want to be engaged are getting every opportunity to be engaged. The remainder of the board can participate in committees and task forces. We have 4 standing committees, which include advisory committees for our international programs, our entrepreneurial programs, our workforce programs, but we also have task forces, and we'll talk about that, I'm sure, today, that get people engaged and allows them the opportunity to get involved. We also have some ex officio members, so we do have our county administrator, we do have a representative from the Board of County Commissioners, and we have the head of our workforce investment board is also a board member. So pretty traditional structure, I think, with that additional layer on the policy council. We do have an executive committee where the chair leads the meetings and leads the organization for the year, but the vice chair is very active in strategy and looks at deploying new ideas for strategy, because if you start a new idea now, chances are when it becomes mainstream will be the same time that vice chair becomes chair. So they've kind of blazed their own trail, and they're allowed to think about new strategies going into that office. And then we have a secretary treasurer position, which does lead into the chair position, and of course our ex-chairs, our past chairs. We lean on our past chairs quite a bit because they have the knowledge and they've seen under the hood. They know how we work behind the scenes, and I think that is probably one of the most engaging things you can do, is to allow somebody to see your operations from the inside out.
Now to the main event.
Yeah.
Board member engagement.
Yeah.
The EDC on your watch has taken some significant steps to strengthen board engagement. So board members do have a more satisfying governing experience, and also the EDC capitalizes more fully on the board as an asset, as a precious resource. Tell us about those steps that you've spearheaded, Bill.
Well, we had to deal with a culture change first. Coming into the organization at the time, Pasco County was largely a bedroom community, and a lot of our board representation was on residential development side, which is not what we do. And although we want to know what they're doing, because there's only so much land out there, we want to make sure we work together. We certainly don't want them making decisions as it relates to the overall business community, because they are residential developers are kind of transitory in nature. Once the house is built, they're gone. So it did not have the long-sightedness that we were looking for. So we had to get out and recruit more board members that actually reflected the type of business community that we needed. In order to do that, you have to have a good value proposition. It can't just be, you're going to sit at the table and rub elbows with the who's who of our community. That might get them in the door, but they don't want to just sit and rub elbows. They want to
actually. It's not going to keep them.
That's right. That's right. So once we kind of reset the deck, or we're able to get the right people on the bus, then it comes down to get them in the right seat. And what we found is that task forces have been the easiest and best way to get them engaged for multiple reasons, because there's always something that needs fixing. For one, there's always going to be something that we need to work on at the community level with regards to competitiveness that we can always do better. So that is an attribute in itself, but it also allows for these board members to be able to look at their personal passions as well as their professional passions. So, for example, we may have a banker that their role is finance in their respective job, but when they come here, they might have an interest in something completely different that they don't get to do during their 9 to 5, and we give them the opportunity to use that. So that banker may actually be interested in workforce development or something that may seem counterintuitive to what they're trained to do, and allows them to get involved in something that they personally want to get involved with. But at the same time, if they want to do something professionally, like that banker, they can work on our microloan program and things like that. So we're giving choices, and we're also giving limited experience or time in those choices, meaning that if you sign up for a task force, you're not going to be there for 100 years. And you're not going to come to a meeting just for the sake of coming to a meeting. You're going to find a problem in the community or challenge in the community. You're going to create a solution for that at the end of the year, and then make a recommendation or create a program that satisfies that need, and then move on to the next thing. So it's go ahead.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Give us a real life example of a specific task force.
Yeah.
And what it accomplished.
Okay. So one that, and this is interesting because no one really likes to talk about permitting and things like that. It's the less glamorous part of what we do. Our county had a real issue with permitting, and especially on the horizontal side of permitting. And we were recruiting companies, and once they would come, they were having problems. And we said, we need to take a hard look at this now that the engineers are speaking amongst themselves about our reputation. We need to be forward thinking about it. So we assembled a task force, looked for volunteers, and there was a lot of people that were in construction, but it was, for example, engineering firms that came forward and said, okay, I'm going to share with you my experience in Hillsborough. I'm going to share with you my experience in Pinellas. I'm going to share with you my experience in Polk. And
for our viewers, these are counties in Florida.
Sorry. Yeah, so this is our surrounding region. And even though we're all in the same region, each county does things differently. So those engineers that were able to cross county lines, that have worked in other communities, were able to come back and bring some of that intelligence with us, and then actually engage their own staff in the process. So we had a couple engineers. We also had people that were in the construction company, but users, people that were on the front line dealing with items like permitting, were able to come back and propose what a good turnaround time and the steps would be, and then use their relationships with the county and their engineers to try it out to see if it worked. And what we found is it did work, the proposed times. And by bringing my board to the Board of County Commissioners and our county administrator with a recommendation, they added more credibility than I could by providing that recommendation to make a change in the permitting times. And the county listened to them and then adopted a change to the land development code, which is extremely hard to do in most counties, is to actually change the land development code. But that was the end product that we were looking for. We needed something in print that engineers could look at and say, okay, Pasco's made these changes and they're so certain about it that they published it and they put it out in print. And that served as a welcome to others to come in to say, this is how we do business here. But it also gave my board the opportunity to work on something that impacted their bottom line, impacted their ability to get things done quicker, in a better manner. And also they could point to and say, I touched that, my fingerprint's on that. And there is a sense of accomplishment for them that while they were here serving at the Pasco EDC Board of Directors, that they can point to something years from now and say, I was the one that helped to make that happen. And that is so much better than me as the hired help out there doing that, because now we've engaged the private sector, the market is responding, and now government is responding to the market. So it was a longer story, but I think most of our task forces have that feel. We've had programs that were developed out of task forces. So our entrepreneurial program called Smart Start came out of a task force, and that's where I think as an economic developer, we're probably unique in the sense that we actually own 3 incubators ourselves, but the board was very adamant. They wanted to make sure that our incubators had a B2B connection and not just a B2C connection. And that was our board. Our board said, we want our startups to have access to us as professionals in our community. We'll make ourselves available to help mentor them and provide true B2B connections for these startups. So those are the types of things that they enjoy, and it's fun.
How are the task forces established? How do you decide to create a task force? Tell us about that.
So each year, throughout the year, we hear about challenges in the community, and we'll save them up. I mean, we'll look at, is this getting better throughout the year? We also, our business retention and expansion unit surveys companies like most EDOs do. We knock on doors and find out what their obstacles are. If we see enough companies with the same challenge, we'll come back, and rather than doing individual triage on each individual company, we'll come back and create a program to programmatically deliver that solution to all the companies. And that is how these subjects or topics come up, is that as we get information from our businesses of what they're struggling with, we'll collect that. And if we see that it's systemic in nature, we'll end up putting together a countywide program rather than trying to handle each one individually, one by one, because my staff isn't that big.
And this program would come from a task force? Is that what you're saying, that you establish? As we see those challenges, if there's enough there that everybody's having the same problem, like permitting, for example, then we'll send it over to the board, and the board will say, okay, that looks like a good task force for the year. And we've actually included in our bylaws that we have to have at least 2 each year, task forces. We can have as many as we want, but we have to have 2. So they know that that's coming every year, that they know we're on the lookout. We've trained them to be on the lookout for items. There's a couple times that task forces need longer than a year. But at the end of each year, we'll reset it and make sure that if other people want to get involved, they can, and they can sign up for that task force. But the goal is to really find a problem, create a solution, either recommend the solution to the county or create our own program to deal with it, and then move on to the next. And it's a great way for us to kind of take down those problems one at a time. But it also keeps them engaged, and they get to see what tools we have in our toolkit to be able to mitigate any of those issues as well. And if we need more tools, it's really nice to have your board be the one that realizes you need more tools instead of me saying I need more tools. To deal with the problem.
Yeah.
So the task forces every year are formally established by board action.
Yes.
The board actually decides. And the task force, I assume, comes back, all
Yes.
of the task forces, when they've got a product,
Yeah.
they come to the board, and the board actually takes action on that.
And we report out, we report out on the task forces at the board meetings to let them know where they're at and what the schedule is and what types of things they're working on, accomplishments. And we ask the board members to actually be the ones that report out on that. So as with any type of engagement, if you've got a lot of C-level executives on your board, always requires somebody to work with them from an assistant standpoint and facilitating the meetings, taking notes and things like that. So our staff is there for them at reach all the time as they go through these to help guide them as well too. So it's a very nice way for both the board to stay engaged, but then they start to develop some additional relationships with my staff, which is great too.
That's
because
good.
we end up with 2 and 3 levels of relationships, and it's not just me.
Yeah. What's your assessment of how the task forces have worked? What in terms of board engagement? What's the payoff bit?
Yeah, it's been good. It's been good because we execute and we accomplish. And I think that a lot of the board members are used to theory and working in theory when it comes to some of these challenges because they are socioeconomic in nature. I think that a lot of companies, especially for-profit companies, they may have part of their own mission that works with their local community and building their local community, but for the most part, they don't. Most companies are looking to make money and do better. This allows for the company to say, okay, we were part of actually helping the community. So you start to talk about the third area of economic development and working in community, building communities. This really allows them to get involved in those areas. It's been working, and we will continue doing it as long as it works. But we've had Workforce Connect department came out of a task force. Our incubator program came out of a task force. Our Ready Sites program came out of a task force. Our new permitting came out of a task force. We've been working on sustainability for the task force, for our finances for the future. Is this still the best model of funding? We've got 3 streams of revenue. Do we want to continue looking at that, or do we want to look at other options now that there's a lot more services that we can provide virtually, for example, to companies? So those are things that we're constantly looking at, but each one of the task forces has had a positive result or return that somebody can point to and say, yeah, I was part of that. And they sign up for another task force, which is probably the best indicator of whether or not it's working is after they're done, do they take on another task force? And 90% of them do. Yeah. It's we've got
that's
really,
an affirmation for sure.
It sure is, and it's to the point that sometimes they show up even in between meetings when there is no task force because they want to talk with the staff and work on these subjects. Very engaging, and we don't pick really boring things. We pick things that are critical in nature. We don't want to waste people's time. And one of the parts of our strategic plan, we've got 5 areas of focus in our current strategic plan, but one is leadership. And we have built into our strategy the ability for our organization, our board, to be able to jump into a number of different scenarios in our county from a leadership perspective, meaning that it might not fit neatly into what we do, but if no one else is doing it and it needs to be addressed, we'll jump in and do it and then Perhaps it'll spin out to another organization that will take the lead on that issue, or we'll adopt it ourselves. But this group will not sit on their hands and say, "Oh, not my problem." They will get involved in issues that may not seem specifically economic development, but they know it's going to take leaders to be able to make the changes, and they roll up their sleeves and do that.
Well, Bill, I happen to know you're an extraordinarily busy CEO, so you'll be happy to learn this is my last question, at least for part one. We can always do a part two, but for this morning, my final question is this. As you look ahead, what other potential opportunities do you see to strengthen board member engagement in addition to using task forces as a vehicle? Any other thoughts about ways to beef up board engagement?
Exactly. We've found that CEOs are busy, and lots of times just adding yet another nonprofit board is challenging for some of them, especially those that are in high demand. What we're looking at doing this year is an executive success program for new companies moving in. And maybe I should mention that Pasco EDC and Pasco County has gone through tremendous growth this last year. We've done a really great job in recruiting new companies. And I think there's a lot of people that assume that those new companies, because they worked with us to move here, would automatically jump on our board. And a lot of those companies are busy. They've moved here, they're getting acclimated, they're setting up shop. They don't know everybody. They don't know which organizations they need to get involved with. We have 5 chambers here, for example. So we said, why don't we educate them of everything that we have to offer in the different things that we touch, because a lot of them only know us for 1 or 2 programs. So we started this success program that kind of looks like a CEO roundtable meeting with a leadership group. So you've got your leadership Pasco, your leadership Tampa Bay, your leadership Florida. They do a lot of visits and they collect a lot of information about their community. Well, in this case, we're running these new CEOs, or the newly located CEOs, through a program that teaches them everything about what we do. And each month they'll take on another module. And the end game is at the end of the year, we hope that they convert into full-blown board members. And that does a couple things. One, it helps that new company get acclimated and meet the players in the community. And we serve as a nice, credible organization that opens doors for them as they're coming into the community. But then when they get exposed to each of our programs, usually there's at least one of them that is a hook. And it might be international, it might be workforce, it might be real estate, it might be recruitment, might be marketing. And once they see that, they want to get involved. And usually they're going to be one of the people that sign up for a task force as well once they come on board because of that. But we said this is another way to start talking to CEOs that are new, we hadn't talked to before, help them get acclimated, help them understand what we have, and then hopefully at the end of that process, convert them into board members that will have the knowledge of all of our parts of the organization. So I think what we're expecting is not just new board members, but strong, really strong board members that know the ins and outs of the organization. I think most
who hit the ground running.
Yes,
once they join the board.
Exactly. Yeah, there'll be no strangers at that point in time, and they'll know about the entire organization and how we impact the community instead of just one area, which because we have a lot of programs, a lot of people just know us for one area. So it's a lot of cross training and cross pollination, but they're also part of a little fraternity of a group that will have a bond going through this together as a class. And I'm interested to see how that progresses, because that class will be an alumni at some point, and we'll start to see each year after that what their engagement levels are, having that firm foundation to start with. So it's aspirational. It's kind of a pilot right now. We're not afraid to try stuff. I think that's something that's really interesting about the Pasco EDC, is that we have 15 employees, kind of larger for small, medium-sized EDOs, but they're all in different departments. And because we work with different program areas like workforce development and things like that, we do have a bigger staff, but we're willing to try something new. And if it doesn't work, we'll quit doing it. And if it does work, we'll adopt it and move forward. And I think that is because the board has been really happy with what we've done. They've given us the ability to get outside of our lane sometimes, and have not been overbearing to the point where they're beyond a governance board. So things have been good, and I'm knocking on wood here in the background, because I hope it stays that way. We hired this year a director, or I guess almost 2 years now, a director of stakeholder engagement. And it's really because, you know, my relationship, I'm still ultimately responsible for all the board relationships, but I can't be at everything. So we want to make sure that we're collecting their needs. And the same with when our companies go out and meet with businesses, we want to know, is there a trend? And if there is a trend at anything, we can develop a program to deal with it, instead of playing whack-a-mole and hitting each one by one by one. So,
well, you know, it sounds like stakeholder relations might be a good part to topic.
I think that would be really nice
for us
and
to
maybe include some of my board members as well.
Yeah,
too.
yeah, that would be great. Well, thank you so much, Bill, for taking the time to tell us about the Pasco EDC's efforts to strengthen engagement of board members in your affairs. And I want to wish you a great day, and we'll start planning a part 2.
That sounds good.
Thank you so much.
Happy Thanksgiving, Doug. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Happy Thanksgiving to you.